Hello everyone, my name is Miloš and in this video I'm going to talk about astrology and ask you for help in my research which should give us an answer to the question, does astrology actually work? Can we indeed rely on position pattern of large celestial bodies from our solar system at the time of our birth to tell us our traits, even our fate, as some optimistic people claim? Here are the topics I'm going to cover here. First of all, what are the most emphasized proofs provided by skeptics regarding validity of astrology? Second, sorts of research that could ruin skeptics' fun, to say that way. Then, reasons why we should be bothered with validity of astrology in the first place. And last but not least, it's actually the most important topic. That's my intentions on how to contribute this debate with some solid proofs that could shift it either way once the research is done. I obviously can't disclose precisely which variables I'm going to use in my experiments, because someone could simply steal my ideas and get credit for the research, but you will get some general clue in what direction it's going to head. Before I get into details regarding all of these, please fill in the form I created and posted down in the description of this video. It's very important. Its purpose is to collect data for my research, which I'll be explaining later on, and of course you're welcome to stay with me and hear my idea. That being said, let me proceed with the story. So, definite scientific answer to the question whether astrology is fully, partially, or not valid at all hasn't been given so far. In your everyday life, you usually see people who say they either believe in astrology or those who say they don't. But what you don't know is that there is a whole battlefield in scientific journals where part of the papers claim they have found certain correlations between variables from natal charts and psychological traits of people, while many others claim the opposite. What are the three major objections of skeptics regarding validity of astrology? Number 1, Barnum effect. Number 2, precession of the equinoxes. And number 3, 4 fundamental forces in nature. In psychology, Barnum effect is the phenomenon that occurs when individuals believe that personality descriptions apply specifically to them more so than to other people, despite the fact that description is actually filled with information that applies to everyone. Basically, it means that whatever information you read from your personal natal chart is generic and could apply to anyone, me, you, your relative, anyone in the world. You probably heard about experiments where the experimenter gave the same natal chart reading to each participant, regardless of their birth date, and he asked them to evaluate it. Most of them said that they agree in very high percentage on what's written about their personality, something like 80% or higher. They of course got very disappointed once they had found out that all of it was fake. Without going into details on what precession of the equinoxes means in astronomy, there are plenty of videos on that topic alone out there on YouTube. I will only tell how it affects astrology theory. According to this, every 2150 years or so, a whole zodiac circle shifts roughly one sign, which means that from astronomical point of view, at that point, though it's a gradual transition, all people born in Leos will become Cancers, Virgos will become Leos, and so on. Not precisely like this, but it's a good enough approximation. Or to put it even more simple, astronomical sky we see from the Earth does not match the astrological one. It restores to default astrological conditions after 25,800 years. And the third objection says that none of four fundamental forces known today, strong nuclear, weak nuclear, electromagnetic, or gravitational, could be used to explain the effect of other celestial bodies on humans, at least while they are here on planet Earth. Trade-off between range and strength of those forces is the problem. Their effect either can reach the Earth, but strength is not high enough, like gravitational force, or they are very strong but work only at short distances, like strong nuclear.
Are these objections justified? Obviously yes, then why astrology still holds its grip despite being debunked? You could argue it's because of money that astrologers make doing horoscopes to other people, but as I previously mentioned, there are actual scientific papers where scientists claim they have found a correlation between specific variables from natal charts and particular psychological traits. Of course, there is also a huge number of papers claiming exactly the opposite, that no correlation was found whatsoever. But if researchers from both categories have been carefully analyzed, accepted, and ultimately published as scientific facts, Then how come that results are so vastly different?
It's primarily due to different methodologies and somewhat because of different samples used in those experiments. Also, we should in no way underestimate the bias of certain experiments caused by what researchers had in mind before conducting them. Unfortunately, sometimes scientists rig their methods a bit to confirm or deny hypotheses to justify finances they got to prove or disprove them. See under global warming, creationism, various chemicals used in different industries, etc.
Can astrology be both true and not true at the same time, maybe? No, something like a situation from Schrödinger's cat experiment? I doubt it. My two cents is that research on validity of astrology simply needs to be readjusted, and that's what my personal goal is. Why haven't I simply disregarded astrology as a pseudoscience? It's after all what most of the people from the scientific community are doing nowadays.
The first reason is that I don't like disregarding things with ignorance, because whenever that's done, there is a potential important clue or a discovery of any kind that we have missed. For example, just imagine what we could have found in all those extinct species that we as a humanity never got a chance to put under scientific scope. Maybe a cure for cancer or some other useful molecules that could be used in different industries. The same analogy could be made with celestial bodies and phenomena in far space. The information that's been forever lost is huge and is only increasing as the time progresses. Thus, in my opinion, it's better to investigate all sorts of potential phenomena and hypotheses that we have access to than to later regret missing something out, no matter how silly they seem to be in the first place. Here I include the so-called supernatural phenomena that are usually considered nonsense even before any proper experiment has been conducted on them. The second reason is that whatever astrology claims to be true regarding its predictions is not thoroughly investigated yet. After researching astrology for quite some time now, I decided to take a step further myself and exercise the possibility of astrology claims that it can predict not just psychological but also physical traits of people. That's right, pretty much like our DNA, which codes not only for our physical looks but also for our behavioral pattern. So, I want to test the correlation between certain indicators from natal charts and physical traits such as height, weight, diseases, etc. That, if proven true, should effectively negate the effect of subjective opinion about yourself, because you obviously can't perceive yourself as, let's say, taller or shorter than you actually are, which is what happens when we talk about relation of natal chart and psychological traits. What else is interesting and hasn't been scientifically proven so far? Guessing natal charts, or at least parts of them, by knowing someone's physical and psychological traits. Yeah, it's exactly the opposite of what mainstream astrology is doing. Usually you provide astrologers your birth data, then they reply to you with whatever their interpretation of your natal chart is, and you either agree or disagree with that interpretation of who you are. Where's the practical difference between these two, you might ask? Well, most of mainstream commercial astrology can be explained with Barnum effect, especially interpretations generated by a computer, while a reverse approach can't. If it can't be disregarded by using Barnum effect, then astrology is most likely true, or better say, at least partially true. However, I still didn't think of cheap and reliable experiments that would confirm reverse approach of astrology, since it's by far more complex to do them. So for now, I'll stick with trying to find a correlation between physical traits and natal charts in normal direct approach. As you can see, my first goal is to answer the question, does astrology work? Only if that answer is positive, we can move on and start answering questions like why and how does it work. So I won't be bothered by precession of the equinoxes and fundamental forces just yet. Let's take one step at a time. Though if you're really curious and want to have at least some clue on how it could work, then I'll read you an interesting paragraph written by famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung back in 1930s. I will leave you a couple of seconds to read the whole paragraph if you want, but the bolded part is the reason I presented it. Actually, you can pause the video here and read it all, but I'm just going to proceed with what he says in the last two sentences. He says, if there are any astrological diagnoses of character that are in fact correct, this is due not to the influence of the stars but to our own hypothetical time qualities. In other words, whatever is born or done at this particular moment of time has the quality of this moment of time. Here we see Jung's hypothesis on how astrology works. Not by planetary positions at time of our birth, but simply by a moment in time when we are born. What he meant by this is that planetary positions at time of our birth, at least those in natal charts, are only a reference to a particular moment in time. In my opinion, those positions might be just a pattern we are reading from, not necessarily a means of projecting the so-called will of the universe, actually will of our solar system, onto humans via using one or more fundamental forces in nature. You know, like a code that carries some sort of a hidden message, and the machine for breaking this code could be astrology. That's all for now, folks. If you like my ideas and initiative on solving this puzzle, please give this video a thumbs up and share so I could hopefully get enough people to see all of this, and what's more important, to fill the form from the description of the video, because that's the way how I intend to build up my database. Need a huge database of birth data to conduct these experiments, and I guess internet, in this case YouTube, is the best and fastest way to obtain that. Once when I gather enough data, I'll start working on it and will update you as soon as certain milestones of the research are achieved. In the meantime, of course, if you have any questions, uh, I don't know, suggestions, whatever, you can write them down below in the comment section. And that's it. Hopefully we will have fun time cracking this astrology enigma together. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.